Welcome back, everyone. I'm Becky Hills. I'm your Floodgate coach and counselor, and I'm very excited to be here with you again today, where we're going to be talking about all of the awesome things about you. And so, just a little bit of a recap. Yesterday, we talked about the model that I used, the framework. We talked about how there's the three pillars that are all rooted in faith. The knowing who you are, the knowing where you belong, and the knowing what is your meaning and purpose. Those are the three main pillars. And as I explained yesterday, those three main pillars work together to create this foundation of resilience, so that what you build on that foundation and then is able to withstand the storms of life. Storms are going to come and they're going to go. Just like with the weather, we can't predict them. We cannot stop them, but we can prepare for them. And that is what the whole purpose of what we're doing here is about teaching you to be awesome, to create a strong foundation of awesomeness, so that when those storms come, you can continue to stand in that and you can withstand whatever gets thrown your way, so that you can continue to move forward and you can have that life of fulfillment and meaning that you desire. So today, actually I'll go a little more. Yesterday we talked more about the knowing yourself and all the things about knowing who you are. And so today we're going to go into knowing how to love who you are. And part of that is understanding that sometimes we have a different idea of who we are and who we want to be. And the closer we're living our lives, the closer to the who I want to be, the happier and the more satisfied we're going to be in life. And so what really this is talking about, this idea of the ideal self. Yesterday we talked about self-image. The ideal self is that person that you want to become. And so when those two things are closer together, we're generally happier and healthier, and we are better able to deal with the storms. And so we're going to get a little bit more into self-esteem and self-worth at this point. Self-esteem or self-worth, how do you value yourself? That is essentially how much do you like yourself? How much do you accept and approve of yourself? Or how much value do you place on yourself? And for self-esteem and self-worth to be positive, that would mean that we are going to have confidence in our abilities. We're going to have self-acceptance. We're going to have an ability to not worry about what others think. It doesn't matter how other people are going to judge me. I'm going to continue on, and I'm going to continue to do what I need to do because I know that's what I want to be doing. Positive, high self-esteem tends to be optimistic. So it's looking at things from a positive perspective. Or you may have more of a negative or low self-esteem. And people who have low self-esteem, that's usually characterized by a lack of confidence, that desire to want to be like or look like someone else. When we look at other people's lives and wish we had that life, instead of going out and creating our own life, we're being jealous of what someone else's life looks like, or worrying about what others think. If I do this, what are people going to think of me? And if we're constantly worrying about that question, we're going to have lower self-esteem. And it's a much more pessimistic sort of view of ourselves. And so just understanding the difference starts to give us some clues there on what we can start to do in order to change those things. That's where we can increase or decrease our self-esteem. And we can do that according to the situation. So different influencing factors that will bring our self-esteem up or bring our self-esteem down can be the reaction of others. So if we have a lot of people that admire us, if we find that people are listening to us and seeking out our company, that's going to increase our level of self-esteem. If we have people in our lives that neglect us or avoid us or say negative things about us, that will have a negative impact on your self-esteem. So you don't have control over what other people are going to say or do, but you do have control over which people you allow in your life. And so that's one clue, something that we can do to improve our self-esteem, is start looking at who are the people in our lives that are good for our self-esteem and who are the people that are not good for our self-esteem. Another area is comparing yourself to others. Well, I think we've all done that, where we've looked at other people and thought, I wish I had their life, or if only I was like them, or, oh, look, so-and-so bought a new boat. I wish I could afford a new boat. I'm not good enough to have a new boat. And we say all these negative sort of things. That's going to decrease our self-esteem. When we're looking at other people and comparing ourselves to others and thinking ourselves as being better to them, sometimes that it does increase our self-esteem, but it's probably not a very healthy way to increase your self-esteem. Looking at your social roles. So people who have a social role that tends to get more respect from others are usually going to have some positive self-esteem going on. People who have a social role with less respect from society. And so some examples of this might be if somebody is a doctor or a lawyer, we immediately expect that they are going to have people that admire them, people that respect them. It's the nature of their job that they're respected. Other people, for example, maybe a factory worker. And so that can impact somebody's self-esteem because we don't go, oh, I'm so proud to be a factory worker. And this is where, if you are a factory worker, we need to work on how do you build your self-esteem even being a factory worker, because your self-esteem, your self-worth, if it's completely tied up in that social role, again, we're getting into an unhealthy situation. And so being able to say, I am who I am, I do what I do, and I'm proud of it is a really important part in building that self-esteem up. How do you identify as yourself? Do you identify yourself as somebody with high self-esteem, or do you identify as somebody with low self-esteem? Do you see yourself in a positive way? Do you see yourself in a negative way? So your identification is going to impact that. And then we can talk about your ideal self. So what is it that you would like to be? Who would you like to be? Who do you wish that you were? And this is that idealized image that we develop for ourselves over time. It's based on things like what we've learned in our lives. It's based on the things we've experienced. It's based on things that people have taught us, like our parents. It might be about what we admire in other people, or what our society promotes, or what we think is in our best interest. So these are the things that are in that ideal self. So when we say, okay, who would I ideally like to be? That's how that's shaped, is through those different factors. And when your actual self, that person that you perceive yourself to be right now, here today, and that ideal self, when those two are far apart, we tend to have low self-worth or more symptoms of depression, more symptoms of anxiety, because you feel like you're not good enough. This is what I should be. I'm not there. I'm not good enough. When those things are closer together, people tend to have a better sense of overall well-being, overall sense of self-worth. And so this is also a piece that is really important for us to understand, is that when those two pieces are further apart, we need to look for ways to bring them closer together. If they're already close together, we still have some things with some goals, things to strive for, but we generally are going to feel good. So that's what we're going to look at more today, is how are we going to bring those two closer together? And so some of the ways that we can bring the actual self and the ideal self closer together, first of all, is by loving yourself. It's saying, okay, I can accept myself as I am, recognizing that you do have gifts and talents and things that you can share with others, and you have the ability to make a positive impact on the world. Those things are already there inside of you. Acknowledging that it's okay to not be perfect. We do not have to be perfect all the time. If we have an expectation that we need to be perfect, we are going to create anxiety and depression for ourselves because perfection is unattainable. So accepting that imperfection in ourselves is so important to being able to love yourself, being able to respect yourself. When you show yourself respect, you're showing yourself acceptance, you're showing yourself love, When you choose to treat yourself well, these are also important factors in creating a sense of love for yourself. Being kind to yourself, self-care, going and doing things that are good for you because they are good for you, because you enjoy them. Those are self-care. And it's okay to take care of yourself, because when you're taking care of yourself, it's kind of like recharging your batteries or re-energizing yourself so that you have energy to go out into the world and bring something positive and a positive energy to others. If you don't take the time to take care of yourself, you don't have the energy to bring anything to other people. Recognizing that there's unrealistic factors sometimes that shape our ideal self is another way that we can learn to love ourselves and bring the ideal self and the actual self closer together. Sometimes we create this ideal self that is so out there and so unattainable that reaching for it feels impossible, and we give up and we say, you know what, I can't be that person, so I'm just going to be this person that I am right now, and I don't like this person that I am right now, because you're never feeling like you're good enough. So recognizing what are the factors that might have made that ideal self become somebody that's not realistic. Right? We want a realistic view of our ideal self and a realistic view of who we are now. So ways that shape the ideal self, the way that other people, especially significant others, react to us can have a big impact on our ideal self. So things like, did you grow up with parents that loved you and supported you? Or did you grow up with parents that criticized you? Those are things that are going to impact how we see our ideal self. If we feel like we are never good enough to win our parents' approval, then how are we ever going to be good enough to win our own approval? So recognizing that sometimes those things have factored in and created this ideal self that's so far out, so far beyond our reach. And sometimes we need to adjust that. We need to say, okay, you know what, that's not a realistic view of who I should be. This is where when you go back and you look at the stuff that we were talking about yesterday and recognizing the beauty of who you are even right now, the awesomeness of you right now, that's going to allow you to start to see how you're already attaining some of that ideal self. And you can start to let go of some of those pieces of the ideal self that maybe are not very realistic. Our social roles can shape our ideal self. Sometimes I've heard a lot of people recently talking about this idea of the imposter syndrome. This is that idea that my social role says I'm supposed to be this way, but I don't really feel this way. So I feel like I'm an imposter trying to behave this way. That I don't really match whatever it is, this social expectation that is on me in my social role. How much do we identify with other people? That's another area that can shape our ideal self. So do we see ourselves as being like others, or do we see ourselves as being inherently different than others? Have we found a group of people that make us feel like we're part of something? Are we finding ourselves being our authentic self in these places where we belong? That's going to help you to bring the ideal and the actual self closer together again. Another way that we can improve our view of our actual self and our ideal self is learning to see yourself as God sees you. For example, in Ephesians chapter 1, there's lots there that talk about learning to rely on how God sees you instead of on the external circumstances. So we gain our worth because of who we are in relationship to God rather than who we are in relationship to other people. Embracing your awesomeness, really what it requires is accepting yourself as yourself. It's adjusting your ideal self so that you can have this ideal self that's closer to your actual self, that still gives you goals and things you can still work on to become a better version of you, but they're not so extreme that they're impossible. We want to see ourselves through God's eyes. God has a view of you. God created you to be you, and he created you that way for a reason. So being able to see yourself that way is also really helpful in being able to just accept and embrace the awesomeness that you are right now today. And then continuing to make the effort to live as your best self. Sometimes we are selling ourselves short. We are living in a way that is below who we really are at the core. Sometimes we're doing that just because it's easier. It's easier just to fit in and conform with the world, but it's not our ideal best self. And so continuing to strive for that is so important. There's a quote, and it's from a Buddhist teacher, and he says, "The purpose of a rose is to be a rose." Your purpose is to be yourself. You don't have to run anywhere to become someone else. You are wonderful just as you are. So I'm going to read that again because I think that there's something very profound there. The purpose of a rose is to be a rose. Your purpose is to be yourself. You don't have to run anywhere to become someone else. You are wonderful just as you are. And how profound is that? That idea that you don't have to be someone else. You can just be you. And by being you, fully you, living in the awesomeness of who you are is wonderful. It is awesome. Just like a rose doesn't have any other purpose but being a rose. A rose does not need to be a daisy. A rose does not need to be a tree. A rose can just be a rose. And you can just be you. And there's something very beautiful about that. And so the homework that goes along with this piece is looking at who is your ideal self. Going back, looking at the homework from yesterday where I asked you to look at some of these different factors about who you are now. And noticing, is there a difference between your ideal self? Are you living close to your ideal self, or are you living in a way that's different than your ideal self? And so taking some look at that, what do you want to change? How are you going to change that? What are the parts of you that you find hard to love? But what are the parts that also make you awesome? And so that's really what the homework for today is about. And remembering that you're living your best self when you're loving yourself. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. If you're sitting here today and you're thinking, you know what, I haven't learned to love myself yet, that's okay. It takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes practice, and it takes time to know the value of who you are. When it comes to value, I sometimes will tell this story. If I hand you a $100 bill, that $100 bill, its value is $100, right? So if I tell you to take that $100 bill and crumple it up and put it down on the ground, and you stomp that $100 bill down into the ground, and it's dirty and it's torn, and you pick it up again and unfold it, that $100 bill, its value is still $100. It doesn't matter that it was clean and crisp at the beginning and now it's dirty and torn. It has still got the same value that it had before. And this is how I want you to think about your value, is that your value does not change just because you have gotten dirty along the way. Just because you've had some things happen to you in your life that have hurt you and caused you to get dirty and torn and crumpled, your value is there, and it has been there since the day that you were conceived. It is a value that is inherent in you. As being a member of the human race, being a human being, each and every one of us has value. And we can choose to keep that value to ourselves. You can take that $100 bill and you can choose to keep it. You can throw it in your pocket. Or you can take that $100 bill and you can use it to buy something, or you can invest it to make that value even more. Right? And so this is where we can take our own value and we can invest in our own value, and we can take that value and we can turn it into something that brings value to others as well. And this is what we're going to start getting into more as we talk about meaning and purpose more tomorrow, is this idea of having value that goes out to others.